But talk about your pain, can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste the Therapist. Let's go. But talk about your pain, can't appreciate. But talk about your pain.
Let me fix this. All right. Hi. Hi, beautiful people. If this is your first time into my live, my name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. And I come on every single Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to talk about things that we go through. And then I talk about ways that we can deal with them. Excuse me. And the podcast has been streaming since 2018. This year made it 6 years. 6 years I've been podcasting. So Wednesdays, I do the live show on my Instagram timeline. I started to I give people 3 choices on what the topic should be. And 62% of the people picked this topic, grieving the loss of the life you thought you would have. Last week's episode was released, and last week we talked about anxiety. So that episode's out everywhere on all audio podcasting platforms, and then on video you can find it streaming everywhere. So today we're talking about grief and grieving the loss of the life you thought you would have. When people tend to think about grief, they think about it in a way of when somebody passes away. One of the ways that as a collective we all started to grieve was during the pandemic, when we had to grieve the loss of the life that we knew, and we were kind of forced to accept the life that we were currently in. And I know even to this day, some people are still struggling with the changes that have taken place. So I'm hoping that today's episode could be freeing for some people, whether it was the loss of the life from the pandemic, whether it was the loss of the life that you thought you would have financially, or where you are in life professionally or relationship wise, right? Us not grieving the loss of the life we wanted to have keeps us in the space of feeling stuck. So right now I'm streaming on YouTube, Instagram. Hey, Nathan, it's so nice to see you in here. Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, simultaneously, streaming everywhere. All right, so let's start. So one of the things, if you've never been into these live episodes I do on Wednesdays, I enjoy teaching. I'm a visual learner. And so I like to give visuals for when I'm talking about these things. So for people that listen on the audio, if you find yourself being a visual learner, you can go over to my YouTube channel and catch these videos because they stay up for the replay. So let's really quick talk about the stages of grief. And these are the stages, right? In no particular order. So there's denial, there's anger, acceptance, depression, and bargaining. These are some of the complicated emotions that come up when we are grieving. And sometimes you can get to a place of acceptance and still feel like you're going back to bargaining. Why is this happening? This shouldn't be happening. Or denial or angry, right? So when you're thinking about these stages, I don't want you to think about it in a linear way. I want you to think of it in a way of where, like, I can be all over the place at times. So that's one of the ways, that's the stages of grief as you begin to listen to what we're talking about today, understanding that it can be all over the place with the stages. As you're thinking about grieving, right, I want to introduce you to this idea of dialectical thinking. I talk about it a lot. I've never named it dialectical thinking, where I talk about both can be true. Like I gave an example on my reel where I said that you may be grieving as a parent because your child has a disability that is very complicated and is taking up a lot of your time. Those emotions of like, you didn't think that no one has a child and think like, oh, they're going to struggle with this or that, right? some of us are dealt with some cards that are so hard to swallow, and we never really like accept the fact that that's happening. And so as you're thinking about like this example of the mom or dad who has this child that's struggling with a disability, I can love my child, but I can also struggle with the fact that this is very hard. And I think because we don't realize that we can hold two truths, we struggle in this area of dialectical thinking. So dialectical means we are either strong. So we are either strong or weak. We are either happy or depressed. We are either accept and move on or reject and rebel. That's the way typically people think, right? Black and white, this or that, right? That's the typical way that you see people thinking. You may even find yourself thinking that way. When you think about dialectical thinking, it encourages us to consider that both of these things can be true, which seem like opposites can coexist, and that they can combine to create a new truth, right? So as you're thinking about these things, really be mindful that you can hold two truths. My family has replaced me as a man of the house. I used to have a job and met in media. I talked a talk show with VIP connections, and now I'm temporarily working a low status job. So yes, so someone is giving an example on how they it says how, let me just put it up. So my family has replaced me as the man of the house. I used to have a great job in media, a talk show with the VIP connections, and now I'm temporarily working a low status job. And then he says, I mourn daily for the life I had, but look forward to building a new life. It's scary because my vision for the future isn't exactly how it used to be. Yes. So Nathan is giving us an example on literally, like I talked about the parent, he's talking about the job, on how he was working in a certain space, and now he's in a different space working. And it's a daily mourning. It's not like a one-time mourning, right? So I don't want you to think like, when am I going to get there? Just take it one day at a time. There may be days that are better than others, but obviously, like, what you thought life would look like. So it's really hard to be in that space. So when you're thinking about dialectical thinking around grieving the loss of the life you thought you would had, it says it can be helpful to practice holding two truths at the same time, being open to the idea that there are many lives worth living. Even though you may not be living the life you always imagine and hope for, that doesn't mean it can't carry joy and meaning. And I think that's where people struggle when they are in the space of not being where they want to be. They don't allow joy and meaning into their life. And it's hard to go through life. It's hard to go through life if you're not allowing joy in. It's easy to do that if you're only thinking about what you've lost, if you haven't accepted that this is my new normal. Acceptance doesn't mean that you are content with where you are. When I talk about acceptance, that's not what it means. Acceptance literally just means it's like, this is what it is. It is what it is. It doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It just is. So maybe sometimes reframing that idea of what acceptance means can help you work on accepting where you are currently. And as you're thinking about this, so we just talked about what grief, the stages of grief, the dialectical thinking, and how two truths can be true. I need you to work on thinking about acknowledging your feelings around it. And you can grab an emotion chart. This is an emotion chart that I got from Beam, a really great organization. They have a ton of wellness tools on their website, but really being mindful of the emotions that are coming up, because those emotions can be so complicated and they can feel so overwhelming. And if you're not mindful of the emotions that are coming up, you're going to find yourself responding to the emotions. Hey, Ursula. So she says, so you're saying two things can be true at the same time. So what is it called when two things can exist at the same time? So it's the dialectical thinking. When you're thinking about holding two truths, right? Because we tend to think of things as one or the other. Thinking about that two things can be exist at the same time. It's not a typical find ourselves thinking here in America. I'm not sure about other places, but we tend to look at situations as black or white. We don't look at situations as, like, let's just use a parent example. let's say somebody has a parent that is giving them a hard time. Like, let's say that, one thing about, I'm going to say about grieving when it comes to parent relationships, I see this a lot with mother-daughter relationships. A lot of times when you haven't accepted, like, maybe I had a kid early and this is hard for me. What I noticed, I noticed a lot of tension with mom-daughter relationships. And I know a big part of it is because of the jealousy, the grief of, like, your child at 16 or 17 is doing things that you couldn't do. And because you're not acknowledging your emotions about it, you're finding yourself reacting off of it with your child. Right. And so, like, I'm using a struggling relationship with a daughter and a mom. And let's just say, like, I love my mom, but I don't like the way she treats me. It feels very complicated, but both are true. And I think it's kind of like, how do I love my mom and not enjoy the way she treats me? Like, and I think if we can, like, let go of black and white thinking in general, right, it can save us a lot of heartache, because the complications is because we're human, we're full of emotions, and we may find ourselves going back and forth in the way that we are, the way we're thinking about things. So now we've acknowledged our emotions. We just talked about the stages of grief, dialectical thinking, both can be true. We talked about the importance of acknowledging our emotions so that our emotions are not leading our lens on life, right? If I'm not recognizing that I feel abandoned, and when I feel abandoned, I find myself wanting to go out and drink. But when I drink, I find myself screwing up, right? So if I could acknowledge, like, in this moment, I feel abandoned, but I may not be abandoned in this moment, but it feels like I'm abandoned. If I can start acknowledging that I feel abandoned, then I'm not going to find myself impulsively going out to do these things that may feel good in the moment, but has a lot of repercussions. Where does black and white thinking come from? I think that's kind of the way we're taught here. We're taught it's a very militant, like, I don't want to say militant, but, in school, you go to public school, private schools and other kind of schools are different. This is the way you think. This is what it was. A lot of times we're not able to challenge our thinking. Kids that challenge thinking in schools, they get chastised, right? If my kids can question me, think about, like, some households, it's kind of like, this is just what it is. This is what I say. This is how it goes. If my kids ask why, I'm not offended. I'm not like, well, I'm the parent and this is just what it is. I'm going to talk to them and explain why. So a lot of times I think part of it is just the way that things have grown up, the way that things have played out, and the way that we're taught. We learn how to just think black and white. And there's a lot of amazing people who have challenged and asked questions, and they've been shut down. So they stopped themselves from having that creative space and allowing themselves to actually, like, think, right? So that dialectical thinking is so important to do, and not find yourself in a box of, like, this has to be that or that. The next thing I really want you to think about is to challenge or be more flexible and adaptable, like embracing that. I know that can be challenging. Think about why we're not flexible and adaptable. A lot of it because some of us are in survival mode a lot, right? When you're in survival mode, ain't nobody got time to be flexible and adaptable, because I need to know what's going to happen next. I'll answer that in a second, Carl. We need to know, like, what's going to happen next. So why would I want to be flexible and adaptable? And so if you can work on embracing it, it can help, right? So when I say embracing it, for people that are listening, the visual says be open to new ideas. So basically challenging some of the beliefs and consider alternative viewpoints, especially people culturally, especially how you were raised in some ways. A lot of times, a lot of the ways that we think could be so constricted and prevent us from being flexible, right? So that's important. Embrace change, see changes in routines or plans as opportunities for growth. So instead of looking at change as like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? You can reframe the way you're processing it in a way of like, you know what, this is a chance for me to grow, learn something new. Having a growth mindset, so see challenges as opportunities to grow. Improve your problem solving skills. So Problem solving helps you resolve specific issues as they arise. Sometimes for people, when problems arise, it was a bad thing. Your system, okay? So one thing I talk about a lot is how the body keeps the score. Your body remembers the things you experience. So when you're in similar situations, you may find yourself struggling, and it's hard to like embrace new ideas. It's really hard to be flexible and become a person that's able to problem solve if you're in this flight or fight space. So you can literally like take your hand over your heart and tell yourself like, I'm okay. This is not the same thing that it was before, right? Like your mind needs direction. It needs answers. And if you're not answering that, then your mind is going to stay in this fearful space, and you're going to struggle with being adaptable. Practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is powerful because it allows you to be in tune with your thoughts. And I want to be clear, I do understand that being in tune with your thoughts for some people can be scary because there's a lot of negative things that are being said. And a lot of those negative things are not you. It's what was said in the past to you. It's the fear. A lot of those thoughts are not true. So it's so important to understand thoughts are not facts, but they're trying to tell us something. And sometimes when you have been through a lot of hard experiences, your system is warning you like, oh my goodness, this is happening again, right? So it's doing what it's designed to do. What you're not doing, you're not using your power to say, nope, this is not the same thing. We're not experiencing the same thing. This is 2024. Like, I am not stuck. So really, practicing mindfulness can really help you gain power over your thoughts. At the beginning, yes, it will be a struggle because you're not used to pausing. You're not used to like hearing what's going on. But guess what? If you want to choose not to be involved in your thoughts will still continue regardless of whether or not you want to be involved. Push yourself out your comfort zone. That's important. You can't grow in the same space. Embrace continuous learning. This example, it says like Netflix and Amazon have consistently pivoted. I think about Facebook as well, right? These companies are like Netflix started off as a tape where you can go to the red box. No, was that Netflix? No, that was Redbox. See, Redbox isn't even, it's here, but it's not. But Netflix, you were able to get DVDs. For people that don't know what DVDs are, it's a little disc we used to have to use to watch. So you were able to rent DVDs. I think about Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster was here before Netflix, but Blockbuster never. So Blockbuster was where you could rent tapes and DVDs, and they never adapted to the changes that were happening, right? So Amazon definitely adapted. I think about Walmart. Walmart was here way before Amazon. Walmart could have been in Amazon if they had adapted to the changes. So really being mindful of that as you're thinking about flexibility and being adaptive. I'm just going to answer this comment. So Carl, does this work for other kinds of addiction like pornography, impulsive spending? Does this work? And I think you're talking about dialectical thinking, maybe. Well, I'll just say this: when you're thinking about addictions like porn or impulsive spending, a lot of the addictions that we have are because we are trying to mitigate pain. My first start in the mental health world was at a shelter and dealing with a lot of people struggling with substances. And I never dealt with that before. I was so young. I was 19. And then I got to know people and I started to hear this story, and I developed a lot of compassion for people that struggles with different kinds of addictions, because the reality is it's like nobody wants to deal with pain. I know that pain is a part of life, but I don't want to deal with it. And it's easier to drink. It's easier to spend. It's easier to hoard. A lot of these things that people find themselves doing is to fill a void. And in that moment, yes, that void is filled in the moment. That is true. But what is also true is that you're going to find yourself struggling with more things. So if I am spending impulsively because anytime I'm struggling, let me go purchase something, and my bills aren't paid, what's true is, yes, I feel good in this moment, but then later on down the road, I won't feel good, right? When I want to wake up early to start my day, to have a better head start, yes, it feels good to sleep in, right? Like when I talk about getting up early, it's not because I enjoy it. I enjoy what happens because I'm starting my day off with me, right? So when you're thinking about these addictions and when you ask does it work, as far as I guess the way to think about it, I want people to be mindful of that, is that both can be true. Sleeping in feels good, but there's repercussions because now I'm not getting the things I need to get done in a timely manner, and I'm finding myself rushing. So we talked about the stages of grief, the importance of dialectical thinking, holding on to both truths, being flexible and adaptable. My best thing, the next thing is like my favorite thing I need you guys to understand: practicing self-care and compassion. You guys are struggling with this like crazy. Like that inner dialogue is wild. And it's so interesting, like when I work with people and they say it, then I redirect them, and then they find themselves saying it, and they're like, oops, I didn't mean it like that. So they're correcting themselves. It's such a beautiful thing to witness people start to change the way that they talk to themselves. Because how do you work on yourself when you're constantly like being a bully to yourself 24/7? You're with yourself all the time. That voice needs to be a lot more compassionate. So as you're thinking about practicing self-care and compassion, be kind, treat yourself with understanding, allow your emotions to flow, right? Emotions are a part of life. Forgive yourself. This is another one: grieving the life grieving the loss of the life you thought you would have, right? Sometimes it's because something happened. Sometimes it's because of something that we've done, right? It's something, mistakes that we've made or directions that we went that weren't the best, right? And instead of us looking at it like, you know what, I messed up there, let me go back to the drawing board and start over. What happens is that we get stuck in, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. 2 years later, same thing. 3 years later, at what point are we going to say, all right, Celeste, like, it's time to release that and let it go, because you're looping in the same direction. You're not going anywhere. um be gentle, so treat yourself gentle, and when you're tired and sick or scared, like, it's okay. Setting boundaries, make value-based decisions to create experiences you want. Express gratitude, be aware of the benefits in your life, and keep a gratitude to journal to help. I'll say this thing about gratitude, is very underutilized. It's hard to experience gratitude and be overwhelmed with grief and pain at the same time. That's like hard to do. Uh, and it's be having gratitude in even the little things, right? And I think a lot of times people are only used to like celebrating and looking at like, oh, you got married or you got a house or you got this. We're looking at these accolades that are more centered around like what people can see, right? I got this raise, I got this promotion. And that's great. I think it's important to celebrate that, but it's equally important to celebrate the journey to that, right? So like I had to get, when I realized I wanted to be a therapist, I had to get my master's, and I like really winged my way through school. I didn't know, I never took SATs. I ended up going to a 2-year college. I didn't need SATs. It was simple to get in, and I could have uh, been in that 2-year program, right? Talking about, oh my gosh, like I have so much time left. Like that's true, right? Dialectical thinking, that's true. But what's also true is that I just finished this one class. That's amazing, right? And I think because it's kind of like going from A to B, if I don't celebrate going from A to B, and if I look at it like, damn, I got to go all the way down to Z, what's going to happen is I'm going to find myself feeling discouraged. My system is going to be like, dang, you got so much further to go. Do you really want to do this? Or it could be like, wow, look at what you did. You went from A to B. Like, that's amazing, right? Like having that attitude about the steps that you're taking is so powerful, especially if you haven't had it shown to you, especially if you're starting over from scratch. It's really hard to do that. So if you can work on that inner dialogue as you're pressing forward, it can go a long way. Setting goals, make sure they're realistic and celebrating your progress. And then this reframe failure. Instead of focusing on failure, think about it as an opportunity to learn and experiment. Anytime things don't go the way I expected them to go, I'll ask myself, okay, like what went wrong here? What can you do, right? Some of the questions I ask my kids when I'm checking in with them is like, what went well today? what didn't go well and how can you change that? Like, what can you do to prepare better for tomorrow? So it's not about chastising them for the homework not being done. I'm going to say like your homework wasn't done, but also like, okay, where do you think you went wrong and how do you think you can fix that so that you don't run into the situation again? Right? So really being mindful, because we're not mind readers. Like, we don't have a crystal ball to look at what our future looks like. And sometimes we make decisions or things happen and doesn't work out. It's really important for us to have a mindset of like, okay, like how can I learn from this? And then other ways to cultivate more self compassion, talking to yourself like you would a best friend. This goes a long way. When people come to me and they'll talk really bad about themselves, and I know somebody in their life, whether it's a kid, a niece, or a friend, and I'll say, would you talk to so and so like this, right? And they immediately begin to be overwhelmed with emotion because they think about it and they're like, I would never even think this way about my child or about my niece or my nephew, right? And so, like, then why am I doing that to myself? Right. So, a lot of times, a lot of our struggle with pushing forward is not because we can't do it, it's because what's happening up here in our mindset, it needs to be shifted in a lot of different ways. Um, so talk to yourself like you were your best friend. Starting a gratitude journal could be helpful. Giving yourself a hug is powerful. Writing yourself a love letter, so powerful. So those are some ways that you can work on practicing self-compassion. And the last thing I want to say is, like, as we're thinking about grieving the loss of the life that we thought we would have, we started off talking about the grief cycle and what that looks like. We talked about like holding on to two truths, the importance of expressing your emotions, the importance of being flexible and adaptable, the importance of practicing self-care and compassion. Now it's so important to set new goals, right? So as we're going through this, right, this process of like grieving and practicing compassion, it's important to set new goals. So as you're thinking about your life and the vision that you want, it's important to think about the results you want to see. So you can literally grab a wellness wheel like this. If you go on Google, type in wellness wheel, these things that come up. So you think about these different areas of your life. For people that are listening on the audio, emotional, environmental, financial, intellectual, occupational, physical, social, and spiritual. You can even create your own little pie and say my family, like the way I want it to look like. Let's say it's a lot of tension in it, and you want it to change. Like, you can literally create different areas, like make it more specific if that's helpful to you, and work on thinking about what do I want in this area of my life. So as you're thinking about the results you want to see, that can help you break down the different areas of your life. And then you create SMART goals. And what are SMART goals? I'm going to show you an example. So SMART goals, for people that are listening, S is for specific. So being specific about what is your goal. In this example, and this is literally something that, this isn't my worksheet, but this is something that I worked on. But in the example, it says, to drink more water, I will aim for 6 cups a day, right? So as you're thinking about your goal and being specific, like, I want to drink more water, but how much water do I want to drink? And then M is measurable. How will you keep track of your progress? So this example, it says, I will track my progress by logging how many glasses I drink each day in my phone or my planner, right? So that you can see your growth. I think that's important. The A stands for attainable. How will you achieve your goal and make a plan? And this says, keep a clear bottle in with me so I can tell how much I've had. And then it says, set an alarm to remind myself to drink every 2 hours, right? This attainable piece is important because we have good intentions around our goals, but then we're not really intentional about getting there, right? So if I don't want to be late for work anymore, I'm going to set my alarm. It's like a no-brainer, but me being late for work means I can lose my job. And losing my job, that messes with my survival. So when it comes to the survival things, we tend to be more intentional about those things than we do about the living piece. The living piece is something that is new for people, right? Like surviving is unfortunately familiar for a lot of people, but living life and surviving life looks two different, like two different things. The R stands for relevant. How will this goal help you? This goal will help me be healthier, have more energy, and help my skin. And then the T stands for timely. When will you achieve this goal? So it says, like, I want to be able to achieve this goal within 6 months. So as we're thinking about setting new goals and a vision for our life, thinking about the results you see, use a wellness wheel, create SMART goals. If you Google SMART goals, you'll find a ton of worksheets. You can make your own. Write your goals down, create an action plan and a timeline, and take action. And then continue to reevaluate your progress. Like, it's never like, okay, let me sit down, let me do this, and everything's fine. Sometimes you got to go back to the drawing board. In fact, especially with this wellness wheel, I always encourage people, like, creating your wellness wheel and checking in with yourself like every 2 weeks. What am I doing with my physical goal? Am I walking like I say I'm going to walk, right? Like, really being specific and breaking it down for yourself can really help you achieve the things that you say you want to achieve, right? So as you're thinking about, I really hope this was helpful for people. And as you're thinking about grieving the loss is such a tongue twister. Grieving the loss of the life that you wanted. As you're thinking about this, I want you to really be patient with yourself. And I hope that this gives new insight into thinking about, like, maybe why you may have been feeling stuck is because you're still holding on to the fact that, like, I never was a doctor and that was my parents' dream for me to be a doctor. And it's not what I want. I'm actually very artistic. I love the arts, right? That's not what I wanted. But my parents, they are survivors, and being a doctor means I can make more money. So, and the reason why they wanted that is because, they want to make sure that I'm going to be okay. So really be mindful of how you are operating mindset wise when it comes to your life, when it comes to the things that you have thought or said that you wanted to do. And yes, so many what ifs, and those what ifs is what is keeping us stuck. And so time is going to go by. You can sit there and, like, create this what if every single day for the rest of your life, or you can grieve the loss of the life that you wanted and work on creating a new path. So thank you so much. I will see you guys next Wednesday, same time, same place.